everybody. Welcome to the Jerusalem Connection. And I am pleased to have gracing our presence Rachel Lipman with an organization called 3G DC. And Rachel and I met whilst on a trip to Poland in late June, just a couple weeks ago, by the invitation of the Polish embassy here in DC. And the goal of the trip was to examine Jewish history in the region of Poland and the Holocaust, of course, and what has come out of that in the decades since. And you notice on my red alert 2 weeks ago, I kind of briefly went over that trip, and we have a lot of information to come out in the next few months to integrate the resources and the information from that study tour into our Holocaust education and our general education on telling the story of the Jews, both ancient and modern. But today we have Rachel with us because she is just a treasure, and her organization is a blessing to the country, and we need to get the word out that the 3G organization is there to share in that mission of telling the story of the Jewish people, not just of the Holocaust, but the survivors, and with the firsthand experiences of the survivors and their descendants, we can keep that history relevant and alive, and the red flags for not repeating it can stay in check. Rachel, welcome to the show. We are so glad that you're with us, and we would love to hear your story and enlighten us on how we can learn from you and your organization to keep the efforts of combating anti-Semitism and educational resources at hand.
So thank you, Amy. I'm really excited to be here. I am a grandchild of a Holocaust survivor. So 3G is grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, and our chapter is in DC. And we have speakers, and we're an organization of people. We do have speakers that will be able to go out to schools or to universities or to other outlets to be able to share our grandparents' story of survival, which often includes the family members of theirs that did not survive. So in my situation, I'm a fifth generation winemaker and mead maker. My family has one of the longest tenures of mead production in the world. That was originated in Poland. And so I have been making mead in tribute to my family history. And I worked with my grandfather for really over a decade. Had a privilege of working with him. And he was the sole survivor of his family, of a very large, prominent family that made honey wine. Since around 1870, and I actually have a little picture of the old label.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so that's the label from 1870. It's a copy of one.
How do you pronounce it in the original?
It's M. Luva, and then this starry means aged, and then Desiree means like a dessert mead, and Ala Malaga is in the sweet style, and it was in Bursztyn, Poland, and it was established in 1870.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's your family's business. That's
my great grandmother's honey winery that she owned in 1870. So it was a female-owned honey winery in Poland, which I think is pretty significant.
Yes.
So it's I've been speaking publicly for a little over a year, sharing my grandfather's story of survival. He was a survivor of Auschwitz, and he survived political prisons, and had to traverse over the Tatra Mountains, and was in the resistance in Hungary, and survived the Flossenburg concentration camp, and then a death march. So he, sharing his story, and then sharing along the way all the different family members and people that he knew, is the way to really, for us, give, for me personally, to give life to someone and a name to someone that would have only been considered as a number. So it's really important that we're able to continue to share his story. And he, as he would say, it's the truth.
And his story is actually on the Holocaust Museum, the one in DC, not Yad Vashem. I'm sure linked over there. But for anybody who's interested, her grandfather William, and his name in Polish was.
His name in Polish was Wolfgang Loew, So it's
Listen.
also known as Vilik, which was like kind of like a nickname. But if you type in William Loew, Loew, which is also the name, the Loew Vineyards is the name of the winery. But William Loew on the Holocaust Museum website, then there's about 4 hours of his testimony that you can watch actually.
It's worth the watch, and you can see Rachel's face reflected in her grandfather's, or vice versa. But it's a stunning testimony. The other thing that's interesting that I want you all to know is when we were together on our trip in Poland, we did tour Auschwitz-Birkenau, where many of you viewers are familiar with some of those images from the Auschwitz album Revisited Art that Pat Hutchins produced. But Rachel had a different connection, a personal connection to that camp. Do you want to tell our network a little bit about that day where we went into that one barracks?
Yeah, it's one thing to hear stories about my grandfather's survival, and then he never talked about Auschwitz really. It was something that when he would get to that part of his story, he really wouldn't go very much further because it was a place of death. That's what it was oriented for. I mean, there was not very many good things that happened there, as in not like really nothing good happened there besides the fact that people that survived were able to survive, and that the people who were living, that were imprisoned there, the ones who were able to, who showed the humanity towards each other, that was really beautiful. But my grandfather, he never talked about Auschwitz very much, and it's about 2 days before that the day that we got to go to Auschwitz, that I had a ledger of his that was translated. We were at the Jewish Historical Institute, and when everybody else had that separate meeting, I was able to get that translated, and wasn't really aware of exactly to the extent of the detail that he was. I mean, it was very short sentences with dates and with number of people, and it was, I mean, he must have had it with him in Auschwitz. But then when we got to Auschwitz, I knew that we were going to see his barrack. I didn't know we were going to be able to walk inside it, the barrack that he was imprisoned in. I was the first family member to have actually walked into that barrack. He was in barrack 20, and it was an infirmary barrack. And the first 2 rooms that we walked into were extremely tough because I didn't know that there were things that had happened there. The certain things that we saw that had happened there. But I have to say, it was really empowering to say the movements that he had throughout the war, the things that he wrote down, which were very historically significant, that, and then be able to say that he was liberated, that he got to leave, because not everybody there got to leave. Yeah, it was a very tough day. It's something that, it's a sort of trauma that you grow up with, I think, hearing about these stories of Auschwitz, and it's a degree of separation because I've never seen it. Like, that's in that aspect, but seeing it was something that, you just know that that place was really, the German Nazis had put people there to die, not to live. I mean, that's the orientation of it.
Yeah,
So.
and it was such a powerful moment for our entire group collectively, because we knew how personal it was for you, and moving for us, and we wanted to just extend our thanks for sharing that moment with us. And the one glory is that, yes, you were able to walk there and visit because he survived, and the testimony of her grandfather's survival is just so powerful, and the things that he accomplished when he came to America, including rekindling his family's business, taking what was attempted to be snuffed out and reviving it here in the States. And maybe someday, Rachel, you will bring it back to Poland, bring it back to the land, and restart the business there. But life prevails through your grandfather and through his daughters, and you and your brothers and sisters and cousins. And we want to make sure that everybody realizes that it is a very personal story that connects us to the history. You know, there is so much history that is forgotten in our schools, in our universities, and anti-Semitism just creeps back into our society in pop culture and entertainment, in our politicians, and it's in our university systems, the experiences that Jewish students feel. And we want to make sure that everybody knows that Rachel and her organization is it's personally connected to this history, and they are willing to help inform your groups, church groups, Sunday school, your public schools, the universities in your community about these issues, so that we can say never again, and it really be never again. Rachel, tell us a little bit about the business that you have built up with your grandfather before his passing, and your grandmother is still part of the business, correct? And it's called Loew Vineyards. It's in Mount Airy, Maryland. I will share the website, and anybody in the DMV area, please go and visit it. I'm taking my first visit next week. Can't wait, bringing the whole family. And we just are glad that that blessing is here for the community, and that you're here for the community. Rachel, is there any other information that you can share with us? I'll put your organization's website on the screen so that folks can access it. Anybody who has questions and can't find the website, feel free to call our office, email our office too. We'll connect you. But Rachel is really working hard to put together a framework for the local community, as well as the community at large, through the national 3G connections. And that's important. And they'll even go into not just go into universities or schools or church groups or Bible studies or synagogues or whatever, but you also have worked, maybe you can tell us just for a couple minutes about your work at Fort Meade and Belvoir with the military.
So I'll go start from so my family has Loew Vineyards in Mount Airy, Maryland. And, it's really interesting because I grew up with this winery. We're the fourth oldest existing winery in the state of Maryland. And
wow.
I had the privilege of really, and my cousins and my siblings and my aunts and my mom and everybody in my family, we have fond memories of harvest and planting vines and going to wine festivals at a young age. And it's one of those things that for us, it was a reconnection for my grandfather's roots, but at the same time, it was a kind of revival of our history, in the sense that it was, we don't have the same recipes of the mead that we have from the 1800s, but we've kind of gotten close enough, and have started a legacy that is really quite beautiful here. And my grandfather, as much as people would say, oh, wine is a passion, it really was a source of an identity. Mead was really is in my family history, and the way that we orient ourselves with this business is really a very strong sense of identity that I have. And we honor our family members through the meads that we make. We have tributes. So I have one named after my grandfather's mother, who perished in the Holocaust. We are releasing one soon that Amy will get to try, after my grandfather's brother, Eli Melech. So there's really every single person who does a tasting in our tasting room, who goes to our tasting room, knows of our family history, which I think is really significant, really important. And involving with myself with 3G DC, it was kind of a natural thing, because when people would come into the winery, they would learn a bit about my grandfather's story. And being involved with 3G DC, of being with a whole community of grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, who all have that similar way of growing up and hearing these stories and wanting to share them. The thing is that the survivors, the numbers are not increasing, obviously, and they are decreasing in a very fast rate. My grandfather was 96 years old when he passed away last year, and I would have never imagined that my life would be without him. But that's the reality. And there is nobody else besides, the 2Gs and the 3Gs to share the story, when the survivors are no longer here. And the whole idea with 3G DC is to really be a support system, to be able to help share the stories, to be able to make it personal, because it is personal. And We speak to different outlets like the military bases, and to commemorate Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day, and we speak to schools and in response to anti-Semitism. But we would love to speak to schools as a proactive thing, to be a part of the annual whenever the kids are learning about World War II, to be able to say, look, this is a real life example of, these are people that really should not have been born. I was never supposed to have been born if the German Nazis had really won the war. If they had won the war, then I would cease to exist. But I exist because they did not win. And so therefore, I get to now share my story and say, look, this is what happened to my family. There was over 80 people in my grandfather's family, and my grandfather was essentially the sole survivor. So, wow. I mean, it's one of those things where, if we don't share these stories, then they don't exist.
Right.
And we need to share that they do exist. Otherwise, people don't realize what they say, and maybe they do when they say things that are anti-Semitic, and I think that they do, but when they say those things, what they're saying is that they wish that there was a whole population of people that would have never been born. And, we're all genetically about the same, 99.95% the same. It's that 0.5% that makes us different. And I think that's really significant to be able to share that this is something that could have happened to any of us. And it did happen to more than just the Jews, but the Jews were specifically targeted. And it's a very, still a very personal thing, even though it's only been 80 years. It's extremely personal.
It's extremely personal, and we don't want it to be lost to books and books that nobody read. And that's why I find that young people, or people of any age, really connect well when someone tells their story. So Rachel, we are so grateful that you can tell your story, your family's story, and we want to help you have outlets to tell that story. And we'll do everything we can to provide those opportunities. So thank you again for sharing your story and for being on that trip. That was so wonderful to meet you on that trip, and I'm hoping we stay friends forever. But like I said, I'll be sharing the 3GDC website and other bits of information, and you can all contact our office anytime to get a hold of Rachel or her organization. But we want this story told, and we want it told personally by Rachel and her colleagues in the 3G and the 2G realm. And we are grateful for them all, every single one of them. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.